Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the empty gym on Station Omega-7. The place looked like every other fitness center he'd managed across 3 different star systems, except this one floated in the void between galaxies. As Earth's most successful rehabilitation fitness coach, he thought he'd seen everything. Overweight executives, lazy teenagers, even a few alien species who'd discovered the joys of processed foods. But nothing had prepared him for the message that appeared on his hologram communicator that morning. The blue light flickered, revealing a nervous-looking Zephyrian official. Their tentacles twitched anxiously as they spoke. "Coach Chen, we have a situation that requires your specific expertise. The Galactic Council has approved an emergency contract for your services." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Emergency contracts usually meant politicians trying to get in shape before elections, not exactly his favorite clientele. "What kind of situation are we talking about?" The official's skin changed to a deeper shade of purple, indicating extreme embarrassment in Zephyrian culture. "We have a dragon, sir. A very large dragon. He was once the greatest warrior in known space, defender of 12 systems, terror of pirates and invaders alike. But that was 1,000 years ago. A dragon." Marcus set down his protein shake. "You're talking about one of those massive fire-breathing space dragons? The ones that can tear apart battleships with their claws?" "The very same, sir. His name is Korvax the Mighty, though he hasn't been mighty for quite some time. After the Great Peace was established, he retired to the pleasure world of Hedonius Prime. He's been there for 10 centuries and well." The official's tentacles drooped. "Let's just say he's discovered the local cuisine and entertainment options." Marcus had heard of Hedonius Prime. It was basically Las Vegas crossed with a luxury cruise ship, but the size of a small moon. Every vice and pleasure imaginable, with food that could make angels weep and entertainment that never stopped. If someone wanted to lose themselves in pure indulgence, that was the place to do it. "How bad are we talking here?" Marcus asked, though he was already getting a sinking feeling. The hologram shifted to show surveillance footage that made Marcus's jaw drop. The dragon filling the screen was absolutely massive, but not in the intimidating way dragons were supposed to be. Korvax the Mighty had become Korvax the Mountainous. His once sleek form was buried under layers of fat that jiggled with every movement. His powerful wings, which legends said could create hurricanes, now barely managed to lift his bulk a few feet off the ground. His fearsome claws were painted bright pink, and he was wearing what appeared to be a jeweled collar with his name spelled out in diamonds. "By the stars," Marcus whispered. "What happened to him?" "The Hedonius Prime lifestyle, sir. 1,000 years of the galaxy's richest foods, 0 physical activity, and constant pampering. He weighs approximately 47,000 tons now, compared to his fighting weight of 8,000 tons. But that's not the worst part." Marcus was afraid to ask. "What's the worst part?" "The Void Hunters have returned." The name sent chills through every spacer in the galaxy. The Void Hunters were an ancient enemy, beings of pure malevolence that consumed entire star systems. They'd been defeated once before 1,000 years ago, by a coalition of the galaxy's greatest warriors. But the victory had come at a terrible cost, and the survivors had sworn never to fight again if they could help it. "Korvax was the key to their defeat last time," the official continued. "His fire could burn through their energy shields. His speed let him outmaneuver their ships, and his tactical genius coordinated the entire defense. Without him, our current military forces estimate a 97% chance of total galactic annihilation within 6 months." Marcus stared at the footage of the dragon attempting to squeeze through a doorway, getting stuck halfway, and having to be pushed through by a team of service robots. "And you want me to get him back in fighting shape?" "The Galactic Council has authorized unlimited resources, sir. Money is no object. Time, however, is critical. Our long-range sensors show the Void Hunter fleet will reach the Outer Rim in 4 months. Korvax needs to be ready." Marcus took a deep breath and considered the challenge. He'd helped former athletes make comebacks, transformed couch potatoes into marathon runners, and even gotten a few hut gangsters to lose enough weight to fit through standard doorways. But this was different. This wasn't just about fitness, this was about saving the galaxy. "What's his attitude like?" Marcus asked. "Is he motivated? Does he want to get back in shape? The official's skin turned an even deeper purple. He's currently in the middle of a 3-day eating contest on Hedonius Prime. When our diplomats tried to speak with him about the Void Hunter threat, he told them he was retired and suggested they find someone else to save the galaxy. Then he ordered another 1,000 pounds of crystallized sugar beetles and went back to his hot tub. Marcus rubbed his temples. He'd dealt with unmotivated clients before, but never one who could literally eat him if things went badly. Still, the challenge was intriguing, and if he succeeded, he'd be known as the human who saved the galaxy by getting a dragon back in shape. "All right," he said finally. "I'll take the job, but I have conditions. First, I need complete authority over his training regimen. No interference from bureaucrats or military officials. Second, I need detailed medical scans and a full psychological profile. And third, I need to meet with him personally before we start. If he's not willing to commit to the process, there's no point in trying." The Zephyrian officials' relief was visible as their skin shifted to a bright yellow. "Anything you need, Coach Chen. The fate of the galaxy may depend on it." As the hologram flickered off, Marcus looked around his empty gym and smiled grimly. He'd always said he could get anyone in shape, no matter how hopeless they seemed. Time to find out if that included 47,000-ton dragons with a serious junk food addiction. The shuttle ride to Hedonius Prime took 3 days, giving Marcus plenty of time to study the files the Galactic Council had provided. Korvax's medical records made for sobering reading. His cardiovascular system was operating at barely 30% efficiency. His muscle mass had decreased by 70%, replaced by layers of fat that pressed against his organs. Worst of all, his fire glands had atrophied from lack of use, meaning the legendary flames that once melted enemy warships now barely managed to light a campfire. The psychological profile was even more concerning. 1,000 years of luxury had fundamentally changed the dragon's personality. Where once he'd been disciplined, focused, and driven by a warrior's code, he was now described as hedonistic, lazy, and completely addicted to pleasure. The report noted that he hadn't voluntarily exercised in over 800 years. As the shuttle descended through Hedonius Prime's atmosphere, Marcus got his first real look at the pleasure world. Massive floating casinos drifted through cotton candy clouds, while below, cities of pure entertainment sprawled across continents. Holographic advertisements promised every conceivable delight, from foods that triggered euphoria to virtual reality experiences that could last subjective centuries. The dragon's private resort occupied an entire island, connected to the mainland by bridges made of crystallized music that chimed softly in the breeze. Marcus's shuttle landed on a pad made of polished gemstones, where he was greeted by a small army of service staff. They were all different species, united only by their nervous expressions and their apparent fear of disturbing their employer. Coach Chen, a tall Andromedan with silver skin, stepped forward. "I'm Zax, Mr. Korvax's personal assistant. He's currently in the main pool. Please follow me, but I should warn you that he's in the middle of his afternoon snack time." They walked through gardens where the plants themselves were edible art, past fountains flowing with liquid chocolate, and around pools filled with what appeared to be soup. The air was thick with the scent of 1,000 different cuisines, each more intoxicating than the last. Marcus had to consciously resist the urge to sample everything he passed. The main pool turned out to be more like a small lake, filled with warm, mineral-rich water that sparkled with bioluminescent organisms. In the center of it, taking up most of the space, was Korvax the Mighty. Marcus had thought the surveillance footage prepared him, but seeing the dragon in person was overwhelming. Korvax was absolutely enormous, his bulk displacing so much water that waves lapped at the pool's edges with every small movement. His once magnificent scales, which legend said shone like stars, were now dull and stretched tight over rolls of fat. His head, still recognizably draconic but now sporting multiple chins, was currently buried in a trough the size of a small building. "Mr. Korvax," Zax called out nervously, "your visitor has arrived." The massive head lifted slowly, strings of what looked like honeyed insects dripping from the dragon's jaws. Golden eyes the size of dinner plates focused on Marcus with obvious irritation. "I told you, people," Korvax rumbled, his voice still carrying the power that once commanded armies. "I'm retired. Find someone else to save the galaxy. I'm busy." Marcus stepped to the edge of the pool, trying to project confidence despite being close enough to become a snack himself. Mr. Korvax, I'm Marcus Chen. I'm here to help you get back in fighting shape. The dragon's laughter was like thunder rolling through a valley. Fighting shape? Look at me, little human. I haven't fought anything more dangerous than a stubborn jar lid in 500 years. I'm perfectly happy the way I am. Are you? Marcus asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing, you look miserable. Korvax's eyes narrowed dangerously. Excuse me? Marcus gestured around the luxurious resort. This is amazing, don't get me wrong. But you're not enjoying it anymore, are you? When's the last time food actually tasted good to you? When's the last time you felt excited about anything? The dragon was silent for a long moment, and Marcus pressed on. I've worked with a lot of people who thought they were happy because they were comfortable. But comfort and happiness aren't the same thing. You're not living, Korvax. You're just existing. I earned this retirement, Korvax growled, but there was less conviction in his voice. I fought for centuries. I saved countless worlds. I've earned the right to relax. You have, Marcus agreed. But relaxation was supposed to be temporary, wasn't it? You were supposed to rest, recover, and then find a new purpose. Instead, you've been hiding here for 1,000 years. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Around the pool, the service staff had gone completely silent, probably expecting their employer to incinerate the impertinent human. Instead, Korvax lowered his massive head until it was nearly touching the water. You don't understand, he whispered, his voice barely audible despite its immense power. The war. What I had to do. The friends I lost. I couldn't bear the thought of going through that again. This place lets me forget. Marcus felt a surge of sympathy. He'd worked with war veterans before, understood the weight of survivors' guilt and trauma. But he also knew that hiding from pain didn't make it go away. I'm not asking you to forget, Marcus said gently. I'm asking you to honor their memory by becoming the dragon they believed in again. The Void Hunters are coming back, and millions of innocent beings are going to die if someone doesn't stop them. You're the only one who can do it. Korvax was quiet for so long that Marcus began to wonder if he'd fallen asleep. When the dragon finally spoke, his voice was different, older and sadder. Even if I wanted to help, look at me. I can barely fly 50 feet without getting winded. My fire barely lights cigars anymore. I'm a joke, a shadow of what I used to be. Shadows can be strengthened, Marcus said. I've helped former athletes make impossible comebacks. I've taken people who couldn't climb a flight of stairs and turned them into marathon runners. It won't be easy and it won't be fun, but it can be done. The dragon lifted his head again, studying Marcus with new interest. You really think you can help me become a warrior again? I know I can. But only if you're willing to do the work. This isn't going to be a luxury spa treatment, Korvax. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Harder than any battle you've ever fought. For the first time since Marcus had arrived, he saw a spark of something in the dragon's golden eyes. Not hope exactly, but curiosity. The faintest echo of the legendary warrior who had once terrified pirates across 12 star systems. What would it involve? Korvax asked. Marcus smiled. First, we need to get you out of this pool and back on solid ground. Then we're going to completely change everything about your lifestyle. Diet, exercise, sleep schedule, everything. The Korvax who lives for pleasure dies today. The Korvax who lives for purpose starts tomorrow. The dragon stared at him for a long moment, then slowly began to move toward the edge of the pool. Water cascaded off his massive form as he hauled himself onto the poolside, the ground trembling under his weight. Standing, even hunched over as he was, Korvax still cut an impressive figure. All right, human, he said, and for the first time Marcus heard an echo of command in his voice. Show me what you've got. But I warn you, if this is just some feel-good nonsense, I'll eat you for lunch. Marcus grinned. Deal. But fair warning, by the time I'm done with you, you'll be too tired to eat anything bigger than a salad. As the dragon's booming laughter echoed across the resort, Marcus began mentally preparing for the challenge ahead. 4 months to transform the galaxy's most out-of-shape dragon back into its greatest warrior. It seemed impossible, but then again, humans had built their reputation on doing impossible things. The first week nearly broke them both. Marcus had started with what he thought were reasonable goals, but quickly realized that 1,000 years of inactivity had left Korvax in worse shape than any client he'd ever worked with. A simple walk around the resort's main building left the dragon gasping for breath and demanding to be carried back to his pool on a hover platform. This is impossible. Korvax wheezed. collapsing onto the specially reinforced exercise mat Marcus had ordered. I can't even walk for 10 minutes without feeling like my hearts are going to explode. Marcus checked his readings on the tablet displaying Korvax's vital signs. The dragon had 3 hearts and all of them were working overtime just to keep his massive body functioning. His oxygen levels were dangerously low, and his core temperature was spiking from minimal exertion. We need to start slower, Marcus admitted, adjusting his training plan for the 3rd time that week. Your body has forgotten how to be active. We're essentially starting from zero. The diet changes were proving even more challenging than the exercise. Korvax had developed a serious addiction to the exotic foods of Hedonius Prime, particularly the sugar crystal beetles that provided an intense, euphoric high. When Marcus tried to replace them with simple proteins and vegetables, the dragon went through withdrawal symptoms that included mood swings, uncontrollable fire breathing, and fits of depression that left him curled up in his pool for hours. I don't understand why you're torturing me, Korvax moaned on day 5, staring mournfully at a plate of grilled spacefish and steamed vegetables. This food has no soul, no joy. It's like eating cardboard. Marcus sat down beside the dragon's massive head, his own plate containing the same meal. Your taste buds have been overwhelmed for so long that they can't appreciate simple flavors anymore. It's like someone who's been listening to loud music for years suddenly finding normal conversation too quiet to hear. But how long until I can taste again? For humans, it usually takes about 2 weeks for taste buds to reset. For dragons, Marcus consulted his notes. The medical experts estimate maybe a month given your physiology. Korvax groaned dramatically. A month of this torture. Despite the complaints, Marcus noticed small improvements. On day 8, Korvax managed to walk for 15 minutes without stopping. His fire, while still weak, was starting to burn hotter. More importantly, he was sleeping better and seemed less depressed overall. The real breakthrough came when they started working on flying. Marcus had set up a series of hover platforms at different heights around the resort's main courtyard, creating an obstacle course that would force Korvax to use his wings without exhausting himself completely. I can't do this, Korvax said, staring up at the first platform, which was only 20 feet off the ground. My wings are too weak. I'll crash and embarrass myself. Or you'll surprise yourself, Marcus countered. Your wings are stronger than you think. The muscle memory is still there, buried under all that unused tissue. Your body remembers how to fly. It just needs to be reminded. Korvax took a deep breath and spread his wings. Even in their current state, they were magnificent, stretching nearly 200 feet from tip to tip. The membranes were stretched thin from his weight gain, but they still caught the air with practiced ease. His first attempt was clumsy, more of a powered jump than actual flight. But he made it to the platform, landing with a thud that shook the entire structure. For a moment he just stood there, breathing hard but with something approaching wonder in his eyes. I flew, he said quietly. It was only 20 feet, but I flew, Marcus grinned. How did it feel? Like, Korvax paused, searching for words. Like remembering a song I thought I'd forgotten. My body knew what to do, even though my mind doubted it. From that day forward, the dragon's attitude began to shift. He still complained about the food and the exercise, but there was less despair in it. He started asking Marcus about human training methods, curious about how such small beings could push themselves to such extremes. Humans are fascinating, Korvax observed during their second week, as they worked on flexibility exercises. You're so fragile, yet you attempt things that would terrify species 10 times your size. Why is that? Marcus considered the question while helping the dragon stretch muscles that hadn't been properly used in centuries. I think it's because we know we're fragile. We have to compensate with determination and intelligence. We can't rely on natural advantages like strength or size or magical abilities. So you make yourselves stronger through sheer stubbornness? Pretty much. We have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's not always true, but the attitude helps. Korvax was quiet for a moment. I used to think like that before the war. Every challenge was an opportunity to become better. But after we won, I felt like I'd proven everything I needed to prove. I thought I could rest. There's nothing wrong with rest, Marcus said, but 1,000 years isn't rest anymore. It's giving up. The dragon's golden eyes met his. You really think I can become a warrior again? Marcus looked at the progress charts on his tablet. Korvax had lost nearly 3,000 pounds in 2 weeks, and his endurance was steadily improving. More importantly, the spark of determination in his eyes was growing brighter every day. "I think you never stopped being a warrior," Marcus said. "You just forgot what you were fighting for. The Void Hunters aren't just threatening random strangers, Korvax. They're threatening every world where beings are living their lives, pursuing their dreams, raising their children. You're not fighting for glory or revenge. You're fighting so they can keep doing what you thought you wanted to do. Live in peace." Something shifted in Korvax's expression, a hardening of resolve that Marcus recognized from human athletes who'd found their motivation again. The dragon stood up slowly, his movements more graceful than they'd been since Marcus arrived. "Tomorrow," Korvax said, his voice carrying the first hint of the commanding tone that had once rallied armies. "I want to try the advanced flight course and increase my training schedule. The galaxy is counting on us, and I've wasted enough time feeling sorry for myself." Marcus smiled as he watched the dragon walk away, his steps steadier and more purposeful than they'd been in weeks. For the first time since arriving on Hedonius Prime, he began to believe they might actually pull this off. By the end of the first month, Korvax had lost 8,000 pounds and gained something far more valuable: hope. His daily routine now started before dawn with meditation and breathing exercises to strengthen his fire glands, followed by an hour of swimming in the resort's largest pool. Marcus had convinced him that swimming was the perfect low-impact exercise for someone of his size, and the dragon had taken to it like his ancestors took to flight. "My fire is getting stronger," Korvax announced during their morning session, demonstrating by melting a steel practice target into slag. "It's still nowhere near my old power, but it's actual dragon fire again. Not just hot breath." Marcus made notes on his tablet, comparing the current flame temperature to baseline readings from a month ago. The improvement was remarkable. Korvax's fire had gone from barely hot enough to cook food to nearly 3,000 degrees Celsius. Still far short of the legendary 20,000-degree flames that could cut through battleship armor, but progress nonetheless. "Your fire glands are responding to the exercise," Marcus explained. "Dragons are essentially living furnaces, and like any furnace, they need proper airflow and fuel to burn efficiently. All that cardio work is improving your lung capacity and circulation." The real challenge came when they started combat training. Marcus had brought in holographic sparring partners programmed with the fighting patterns of various enemy species, including the limited data available on Void Hunter tactics. Watching Korvax attempt to fight in his current condition was both inspiring and heartbreaking. His instincts were still there, buried under 1,000 years of rust but fundamentally sound. He knew where to position himself, how to use his size advantage, when to breathe fire and when to rely on claws and teeth. But his body couldn't keep up with his mind. Movements that should have been lightning fast were ponderous and clumsy. Flight maneuvers that once made him untouchable now left him vulnerable and gasping. "I'm pathetic." Korvax panted after a particularly frustrating session where he'd been killed by a holographic Void Hunter 3 times in a row. "Any competent enemy would destroy me in seconds." "You're learning," Marcus corrected. "Every mistake teaches your body something it forgot. Every failure is making your success inevitable." Marcus had started incorporating some unconventional training methods, drawing on human military techniques that emphasized adaptability and creative thinking. Dragons traditionally fought like flying tanks, using overwhelming power and direct assault tactics, but Korvax's current limitations forced him to be more strategic, more clever in his approach. "Try thinking like a human," Marcus suggested during one session. "You can't overpower this enemy right now, so how would you outsmart it?" Korvax paused, considering the advice. On his next attempt against the holographic Void Hunter, instead of trying to match its speed, he used environmental tactics. He lured it into a narrow canyon where its maneuverability was limited, then used controlled cave-ins to trap and crush it. The strategy worked perfectly. That was different, Korvax admitted afterward. More like a hunt than a battle, but effective. Human warriors learned long ago that winning isn't about being stronger than your enemy, Marcus explained. It's about being smarter, more adaptable, and more determined. You're still thinking like the dragon you were instead of becoming the dragon you need to be. The psychological transformation was as important as the physical one. Marcus had noticed that Korvax still carried tremendous guilt about the original war against the Void Hunters. In quiet moments, the dragon would stare off into space with an expression of profound sadness. "Tell me about your friends," Marcus said one evening as they sat watching the sunset from the resort's highest tower. The ones who didn't make it through the war. Korvax was quiet for so long that Marcus thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. Thyra was my wingmate for 300 years, he said. A silver dragon smaller than me but twice as fast. She could dance through enemy fire like it was a gentle rain. She died saving a refugee convoy from a Void Hunter dreadnought, threw herself directly into its main weapon to give the civilians time to escape. She sounds like she was brave. She was magnificent. They all were. Gorth the Bold, who could breathe ice instead of fire and freeze entire enemy fleets. Nyx the Clever, who was only half my size but could outthink any enemy commander. One by one they fell and I survived. I've spent 1,000 years asking myself why. Marcus recognized survivor's guilt when he heard it. He'd worked with human veterans who carried similar burdens. Warriors who couldn't understand why they'd lived when better people had died. Maybe you survived because you still had something left to do, Marcus suggested. Maybe this moment right now is why you made it through that war. The galaxy needs Korvax the Mighty one more time. But I'm not mighty anymore, Korvax protested. I'm not the dragon they believed in. No, Marcus agreed. You're better. You're wiser. You understand the cost of war in a way you didn't before. That makes you more dangerous to enemies and more valuable to allies. Something in his words seemed to resonate with the dragon. Korvax straightened, his posture becoming more confident, more alert. For a moment, Marcus caught a glimpse of the legendary warrior hiding beneath layers of self-doubt and physical limitation. You know what the hardest part of training has been? Korvax asked suddenly. What? Learning to believe in myself again. For 1,000 years, I've defined myself by my failures, my losses, my decision to give up. You're asking me to remember what it feels like to be someone who doesn't give up. Marcus smiled. That's the most human thing you've ever said. We spend half our lives learning to believe we can do impossible things, and the other half doing them anyway when we don't believe. As they watched the alien stars emerge in the darkening sky, Marcus felt a surge of optimism. Korvax was still far from his old fighting weight, both physically and mentally, but he was transforming into something new. Not just a return to what he'd been, but an evolution into something better. The dragon seemed to sense his thoughts. How much time do we have left? Marcus checked his tablet. 2.5 months until the Void Hunters reach the Outer Rim. But you don't need to be perfect, Korvax. You just need to be ready enough. Ready enough to save the galaxy? Ready enough to give it a fighting chance. Sometimes that's all any of us can do. The breakthrough came in week 6, during what Marcus had planned as a routine endurance flight. They'd established a course around Hedonius Prime's 3 moons, a journey that pushed Korvax's current limits without completely exhausting him. Halfway through the circuit, emergency broadcasts began flooding all communication channels. Void Hunter scout ships have been detected in the Kepler system, the panicked voice of a Galactic Council officer crackled through their comm units. They're 3 weeks ahead of our projections. All available military forces are being mobilized for immediate deployment. Korvax stopped mid-flight, hovering in space as he processed the news. Marcus could see the conflict playing out across the dragon's features. The warrior's instinct to rush to battle, warring with the realistic assessment of his current capabilities. I'm not ready, Korvax said quietly. I'm stronger than I was, but I'm still not even half of what I used to be. If I go now, I'll just get myself killed without accomplishing anything. Maybe being ready isn't about reaching some perfect physical condition, Marcus replied, pulling his small spacecraft alongside the dragon. Maybe it's about being willing to fight anyway. They received a priority message from Admiral Vex of the Galactic Defense Force within hours of returning to the resort. The Andromedan's usually calm demeanor was cracked with stress as she briefed them on the situation. The scout ships destroyed 2 minor colonies before our forces could respond, she reported. They're testing our defenses, learning our capabilities. Our analysts estimate we have perhaps 10 days before the main fleet arrives. What about the other dragons? Marcus asked. Surely Korvax wasn't the only survivor from the last war. Admiral Vex's expression grew grim. There are 3 others still alive. Piraxis is too old and frail to fight. He can barely maintain his own body temperature anymore. Mordak went insane centuries ago and attacks anyone who approaches him. Zephyra. She paused. Zephyra might help, but she's demanded an impossible price. What kind of price? Korvax asked. She wants the Galactic Council to surrender complete military authority to her personally. She believes democratic leadership is too slow and indecisive for wartime. She's probably right, but granting that kind of power to anyone would fundamentally change our civilization. Marcus watched Korvax process this information. The dragon's expression was thoughtful, strategic in a way Marcus hadn't seen before. This wasn't the pleasure-seeking retiree he'd met 2 months ago, nor was it the guilt-ridden veteran who'd been hiding from responsibility. This was someone thinking like a leader. What if we don't need the other dragons? Korvax said suddenly. What if the real answer isn't trying to recreate the same strategy that worked 1,000 years ago? Admiral Vex looked confused. I don't understand. The historical records are clear. The combined might of all 4 great dragons was barely enough to defeat the Void Hunters the first time. That was then, Korvax replied. The galaxy has changed. Your technology has advanced. Your species have learned to work together in ways they never did before. Maybe what you need isn't 4 ancient dragons trying to relive past glory. Maybe you need one dragon who understands how to work with modern forces. Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was exactly the kind of adaptive thinking he'd been trying to encourage. Korvax wasn't just getting physically stronger, he was learning to think beyond the limitations of his past experience. You have an idea, Marcus observed. I do, but first I need to test something. Admiral, how quickly can you get me tactical data on the scout ships? I want to know everything about their capabilities, their weaknesses, their patterns of behavior. Admiral Vex looked uncertain. Korvax, with all respect, you're not ready for combat yet. Coach Chen's reports show remarkable progress, but I'm not talking about fighting them directly, Korvax interrupted. I'm talking about something much more dangerous, thinking like them. Over the next 3 days, Korvax threw himself into studying the enemy with an intensity that surprised everyone, including Marcus. The dragon absorbed tactical reports, historical analyses, and theoretical projections with the hunger he'd once reserved for gourmet foods. He questioned every assumption, challenged every strategy, and began to develop a comprehensive understanding of how the Void Hunters operated. They're not just mindless destroyers, Korvax explained to Marcus during one of their late-night planning sessions. They're farmers. They cultivate civilizations, let them grow and develop, then harvest them for their energy and resources. The 1,000-year gap wasn't them being defeated. It was them waiting for the galaxy to become worth harvesting again. Marcus reviewed the dragon's notes, impressed by the depth of analysis. So they're not interested in conquest for its own sake. They want maximum return on their investment. Exactly. Which means they'll target population centers, industrial worlds, and key strategic points. They won't waste time on empty systems or marginal colonies. They want the biggest civilizations they can find. And that gives us an advantage how? Korvax's eyes gleamed with the light of strategic insight. Because it makes them predictable. They'll follow efficient patterns, prioritize valuable targets, and avoid unnecessary risks. 1,000 years ago, we fought them like berserkers, throwing everything we had at them in desperate last stands. This time, we're going to fight them like humans. What does that mean? It means we're going to be smarter, not stronger. We're going to use their predictability against them. We're going to make them come to us on ground of our choosing, and then we're going to surprise them with tactics they've never seen before. Marcus began to understand what Korvax was planning. You're not just training to be a warrior again. You're training to be a general. The galaxy doesn't need Korvax the Mighty charging into battle like he did 1,000 years ago, the dragon agreed. It needs someone who can coordinate a defense that uses every advantage modern civilization can provide. It needs Korvax the strategic. The transformation was remarkable to watch. As Korvax shifted from thinking like an individual warrior to thinking like a military commander, his entire approach to training changed. He started requesting information about fleet movements, communication systems, and logistics chains. He began studying human military history, fascinated by how such physically weak beings had managed to defeat enemies with overwhelming advantages. Your species has a talent for turning disadvantages into advantages, Korvax observed after reading about human naval tactics. Smaller ships that move faster, weaker weapons that strike more precisely, fewer soldiers who coordinate more effectively. It's counterintuitive, but it works. Because we have to make it work, Marcus replied. When you can't win through strength, you find another way to win. And that's what I need to do now. I can't be the dragon I was, but I can be the dragon the galaxy needs me to be. As their 7th week of training concluded, Marcus realized that his original mission had evolved into something much larger. He wasn't just helping an out-of-shape dragon get back in fighting condition, he was helping birth a new kind of leader, one who combined ancient wisdom with modern understanding, personal power with strategic thinking. The call came at dawn on their 52nd day of training. Admiral Vex's image flickered to life in the resort's command center, her face grim with urgent news. "The main Void Hunter fleet has emerged from hyperspace," she announced without preamble. 15 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, and over 200 smaller vessels. They're moving toward the Centauri cluster, 20 billion civilians in their path. Korvax stood beside Marcus, no longer the bloated creature who'd lounged in hot tubs just weeks ago. He'd lost over 15,000 pounds. His scales had regained much of their luster, and his movements carried the fluid grace of a natural predator. Most importantly, his eyes held the sharp focus of a born strategist. "How long until they reach Centauri?" Korvax asked. 18 hours at their current speed. Our combined fleets are moving to intercept, but preliminary tactical analysis gives us less than a 20% chance of success without Dragon support. Marcus checked his training logs. By every metric they'd established, Korvax was still only operating at about 60% of his legendary capabilities. His fire burned hot enough to damage enemy ships but couldn't cut through their heaviest armor. His speed was good enough for tactical maneuvering, but wouldn't let him dance through enemy formations like he once had. His endurance could sustain him through a long battle, but not the marathon conflicts that had defined the last war. "I'm going," Korvax said simply. "Korvax," Marcus started, "you're not at full strength yet. Maybe we should wait for a better opportunity." The dragon's golden eyes met his, and Marcus saw something that made him stop mid-sentence. Not recklessness or desperation, but calm certainty. "Marcus, you've spent 2 months teaching me that strength isn't just about raw power. It's about using what you have effectively. I may not be the dragon I was, but I'm the dragon I need to be for this moment." Admiral Vex looked uncertain. "What's your plan?" Korvax moved to the holographic display showing the projected battle zone. With a gesture, he pulled up tactical readouts of both fleets, studying the formations with the eye of someone who'd spent weeks absorbing military strategy. "The traditional approach would be for me to charge the enemy flagship and try to destroy it in single combat while your fleets engage the escorts. That's what I did 1,000 years ago, and it barely worked even when I was at peak condition. So what are you proposing instead?" "Human tactics," Korvax said, glancing at Marcus with something approaching gratitude. "Asymmetric warfare. Force multiplication, turning their strengths against them." He manipulated the display, showing the asteroid field that bordered the Centauri system. "The Void Hunters will approach through this field because it's the most direct route. They'll assume their shields can handle any debris. What they won't expect is for the debris to be weaponized." Admiral Vex leaned forward, intrigued despite her skepticism. "Explain." "I spend the next 12 hours preparing the battlefield. My fire may not be strong enough to cut through dreadnought armor, but it's more than sufficient to superheat asteroids until they become molten projectiles. I turn the entire approach vector into a gauntlet of natural weapons." Marcus began to see the brilliance of the plan. "You're not fighting them ship to ship. You're changing the nature of the battlefield itself." "Exactly. And while they're dealing with my surprise, your fleets attack from an unexpected angle. Not head-on where they're strongest, but from the sides where their formations are weakest." Admiral Vex was already running tactical projections. "It could work, but it requires you to spend hours in open space, completely exposed, while you prepare the asteroids. If they send scouts ahead, then I deal with scouts," Korvax said with quiet confidence. "I may not be able to dance through an entire fleet anymore, but I can still handle individual ships." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus helped Korvax run through breathing exercises to optimize his fire output, while military engineers loaded his carrying harness with emergency supplies and communication equipment. The dragon who'd once refused to leave his hot tub was now calmly preparing for what might be his final battle. "You know this is incredibly dangerous," Marcus said as they ran through final equipment checks. "If something goes wrong, then I'll die doing what I was meant to do instead of slowly rotting in a pool of luxury." Korvax replied. "Marcus, you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Purpose. For 1,000 years I thought my story was over. You helped me realize it was just waiting for the next chapter." As Korvax prepared to launch toward the asteroid field, Marcus felt an unexpected surge of emotion. 2 months ago, he'd been just a fitness coach taking on an unusual client. Now he was watching someone he'd come to respect prepare for a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. "One more thing," Marcus called out as Korvax spread his wings. "Remember what we practiced about adaptive tactics. If the plan doesn't work, don't try to force it. Find a new way." Korvax's dragon face managed something like a smile. "Think like a human, you mean? Think like Korvax, the new Korvax. The one who's learned that sometimes the best way to be mighty is to be smart." The dragon launched himself into space with powerful wing beats, his form quickly shrinking to a distant speck against the star field. Marcus watched until he disappeared, then turned to Admiral Vex's communication screen. "Admiral, I want to be there when this happens. Is there a ship I can observe her from?" "Coach Chen, this is going to be a major space battle." "It's no place for civilians. That dragon is my responsibility," Marcus interrupted. "I've been training him for 2 months, and I'm not about to abandon him now. Besides, you might need someone who understands how his mind works." Admiral Vex studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. Report to Landing Pad 7. The cruiser Determination can give you a front-row seat to either our greatest victory or our final defeat." As Marcus hurried toward the landing pad, he reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He'd come to Hedonius Prime to help an out-of-shape dragon lose weight. Instead, he'd discovered that sometimes the most important transformations weren't physical at all. The fate of the galaxy now rested on whether a legendary warrior could become something entirely new. A strategic thinker who fought with his mind as much as his claws, and somehow Marcus had played a part in making that transformation possible. In a few hours, they'd all find out if it was enough. The bridge of the cruiser. Determination hummed with tense energy as Marcus watched the tactical displays. Through the viewports, he could see the asteroid field where Korvax had spent the last 8 hours preparing his surprise. The dragon was no longer visible, having positioned himself deep within the rocky maze. But thermal sensors showed the heat signatures of dozens of superheated asteroids glowing like miniature suns throughout the field. "Void Hunter fleet emerging from hyperspace," reported the sensor officer. 15 dreadnoughts confirmed, escort vessels numbering in the hundreds. Admiral Vex stood at the center of the bridge, her silver skin gleaming under the tactical lights. "All ships maintain position. Remember, we don't engage until Korvax springs his trap." Marcus found himself holding his breath as the enemy fleet approached the asteroid field. The Void Hunter ships were as terrifying as the legends described. Massive black vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their hulls covered in organic-looking protrusions that pulsed with malevolent energy. "They're not slowing down," observed the tactical officer, "maintaining full speed through the approach vector." "Arrogant," Admiral Vex muttered. "They think nothing in this system can threaten them." That's when Korvax struck. The first superheated asteroid came screaming out of the field like a guided missile, its molten surface trailing fire and debris. The lead Void Hunter cruiser tried to evade, but the projectile tracked its movement with impossible precision. The impact sent shockwaves through the enemy formation as armor plating vaporized and internal systems overloaded. Then the real assault began. From his hidden position, Korvax had turned dozens of asteroids into weapons, each one precisely aimed and timed. But more impressive than the raw firepower was the tactical brilliance of his attack pattern. He wasn't just throwing rocks at the enemy fleet. He was hurting them, forcing their formation to break apart as ships tried to avoid the bombardment. "By the stars," whispered the tactical officer. "He's splitting their fleet in half." Marcus watched in amazement as Korvax's strategy unfolded. The dragon had identified the weakness in the Void Hunter formation. Their ships were designed to operate as a unified mass, each vessel protecting the others with overlapping shields and coordinated fire patterns. By forcing them to scatter, he'd eliminated their primary advantage. "Korvax to Fleet Command." The dragon's voice crackled over the comm system, slightly breathless but steady. "Enemy formation disrupted. Western Group has 7 ships, Eastern Group has 8. Requesting immediate flanking attack on the Western Group." "You heard him," Admiral Vex commanded. "All ships, attack pattern Theta. Hit them while they're separated." The Galactic Defense Fleet moved with precision that would have been impossible against an intact enemy formation. Cruisers and destroyers darted between the scattered Void Hunter ships, their weapons finding gaps in the enemy's defenses. For the first time in the battle, Marcus felt a surge of hope. But the Void Hunters weren't finished. As their initial shock wore off, they began to adapt, regrouping into smaller but more maneuverable formations. Worse, their flagship, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed every other ship in the system, was beginning to charge some kind of weapon that made the air itself seem to vibrate with malevolent energy. Energy spike detected from the flagship, reported the sensor officer. Power levels unlike anything in our databases. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. What kind of weapon? Unknown, but if the power readings are accurate, it could destroy multiple planets simultaneously. That's when Korvax did something completely unexpected. Instead of continuing his asteroid bombardment, he emerged from the field and flew directly toward the flagship, his form barely visible against the massive ship's hull. "What is he doing?" Admiral Vex demanded. "That's suicide." Marcus watched the tactical display with growing understanding. No, it's not. He's not trying to destroy the ship. He's trying to get inside it. On the screen, they could see Korvax's heat signature moving across the flagship's surface, searching for something. The dragon's fire lanced out in precise bursts, not trying to penetrate the heavy armor but targeting specific points along the hull. "Korvax to Fleet Command," came the dragon's voice again, strain evident in his tone. "I've found their power coupling systems. Human military history suggests these ships need external cooling vents for their main weapons. Preparing to block them." Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was exactly the kind of adaptive thinking they'd practiced together, using knowledge of engineering principles rather than brute force to find an enemy's weakness. The dragon's plan worked perfectly. By breathing, fired directly into the flagship's cooling systems, Korvax caused a cascade failure that forced the massive weapon to shut down before it could fire, but the effort left him exposed on the ship's hull, and Void Hunter fighters began swarming toward his position. "He can't fight them all off while staying in position," Admiral Vex observed grimly. "If he moves to defend himself, their main weapon will come back online." Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "Admiral, I need to speak to the fleet. This is hardly the time for. Trust me, please." Admiral Vex looked at him for a moment, then nodded to the communications officer. "Open a channel to all ships." Marcus took a deep breath, thinking of everything he'd learned about leadership during his months with Korvax. "All ships, this is Marcus Chen. I know I'm just a human fitness coach, but I've spent 2 months training with Korvax, and I know how he thinks. He's not trying to be the hero who saves the day alone. He's trying to be the leader who gives everyone else the chance to save it together." He paused, watching the tactical display where Korvax continued to hold his position, despite the approaching fighters. "That flagship's weapon can destroy worlds, but only if it has time to charge. Korvax is buying us that time at the cost of his own safety. Don't waste his sacrifice by playing it safe. Every ship, every weapon, everything you've got. Hit them now while they can't fight back at full strength." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship in the Galactic Defense Fleet opened fire simultaneously, pouring everything they had into the scattered Void Hunter formation. Without their flagship's devastating weapon, and with their formation still disrupted, the enemy found themselves outgunned for the first time in the battle. Meanwhile, Korvax proved that 2 months of training had given him more than just physical conditioning. Unable to fight the approaching fighters directly while maintaining his position, he used the flagship's own structure against them. His fire carved through hull plating and support struts, creating debris fields that the fighters had to navigate, slowing their approach and making them easier targets for the fleet's long-range weapons. The battle turned into a rout. Caught between Korvax's tactical genius and the fleet's concentrated firepower, the Void Hunter formation collapsed. Ship after ship either exploded under the assault or fled into hyperspace, abandoning the battle entirely. When the flagship finally succumbed to the combined assault, its destruction lit up the asteroid field like a second sun. In the aftermath, as the last enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, a profound silence settled over the fleet. "Korvax, report," Admiral Vex called out. The dragon's voice came back tired but triumphant. "Mission accomplished, Admiral. Enemy fleet destroyed or routed. The Centauri cluster is safe. Marcus felt tears he hadn't expected running down his cheeks. Through the viewport, he could see Korvax flying slowly back toward the fleet, his movements showing the exhaustion of someone who'd pushed himself to his absolute limits and beyond. 2 months ago, Marcus had met the galaxy's fattest dragon, a washed-up veteran hiding from his responsibilities in a haze of luxury and self-pity. Today, he watched that same dragon return from a battle that had saved 20 billion lives, not through the overwhelming power he'd once possessed, but through intelligence, strategy, and the kind of adaptive thinking that humans had perfected over millennia of being the underdog. "Admiral," Korvax's voice came over the comm again, "I'd like to request that Coach Chen be given full honors for this victory. The tactics that won this battle weren't dragon tactics or human tactics. They were what we created together." As the fleet began its journey home, Marcus reflected on the most important lesson his unlikely student had taught him. Sometimes the greatest transformations weren't about becoming what you used to be. Sometimes they were about becoming something entirely new. Korvax the Mighty had died 1,000 years ago in the fires of the last war. But from his ashes, something better had emerged. Korvax the Wise, protector not just of individual worlds but of the idea that different species could work together to achieve impossible things. The galaxy was safe. Not because its greatest warrior had returned, but because its greatest warrior had learned to be something more.